Sorry for my bad hairstyle. I couldn't wait. All right, I didn't give all the information on Tesla's ideal flying machine, but at least we have a good foundation upon which to start, namely the patent that describes not everything. Obviously, patents always withhold something, and so I had to figure out that there was something more, and patents do what they do, they withhold. So here's the missing piece of information. So what the patent described was the longitudinal vibration, mechanical vibration, reciprocating vibration of the spin axis of an electromagnetic field. And the magnetic field has to rotate at the same rate and be completely, perfectly in phase with the reciprocation of its spin axis in space. And the rate of rotation, for that matter, and the speed of reciprocation versus also the size or intensity of the electromagnetic field are variables that have to be worked out. They're details. But there's one other detail that's very significant, and that is there has to be an electrostatic field that is stationary, does not move, and it's greater probably than the intensity of the electromagnetic field. And what it will do, it will preserve, first of all, it'll give you the absolute reference frame that everybody's been seeking in the ether, or trying to locate the ether to find that absolute frame of reference. Well, it don't exist because space is an abstraction and the ether is space. Both are abstractions. They're not fictions, they're abstractions. Just like mathematics is not a fiction in the sense that it's not real. It's very real, it's just not concrete. Now, so we create an absolute frame of reference by creating an electrostatic field which is stationary in respect to the vibration of the electromagnetic field along its spin axis. Okay, and meanwhile, the electromagnetic field is spinning at the same rate of rotation that it is vibrating along its longitudinally along its spin axis. So that completes the basic concept. Now there are all kinds of details. Now I came up with a reactive device about 2 years ago in my derived from my simulation of the Joseph Newman motor, and it's quite powerful in certain variations. And one, I have a schematic up on my website, so long as you can find it. It's at is.gd/Heaviside Ferranti, and that's Heaviside, spelled like Oliver Heaviside, his last name, without a break, followed by Ferranti, which is an Italian guy, and I'll spell his name F as in Frank, E as in Edward, double R as in two Roberts, A as in Apple, N as in Nancy, T as in Thomas, I, not E, I is the last letter, as in independence. And then you attach the word schematic to the end of that to get the zip file, or the simulation file. I can't remember which. I believe it's probably the zip file that contains the simulation file and the schematics and whatnot, the background. Because I do trace routes, tracings, simulated oscilloscope tracings in order to show you what I claim on that schematic. I claim gigawatts. I think it's gigawatts of power output, and the input is extremely small, something like less than a microwatt, like nanowatts or something. It's probably around nanowatts. I'll take a guess. I can't remember. Anyway, that was, I posted that back in June or July. I think it was 2019, so about half a year ago. And then I scurried on to other things, and I forgot all about it. And somebody on YouTube brought it to my attention by replying to the video. I made a video about that discovery and posted it on YouTube, and it's still there on Physics 101, my channel called Physics 101. So he brought it to my attention and reminded me, hey, at the time that I did it, I thought it was pretty cool, and I thought I'll never be able to top this. But my mind was racing with so much creativity, I just couldn't stop myself. I just had to go on to other things. I couldn't stop. Well, now I've stopped because I fried my computer motherboard, and I don't have a computer anymore. I've got a laptop, but it's worthless. I can't work with that. I mean, if I have to, I have done a little work with it. It's a little simulation work, but it's atrociously slow. And my cell phone, it's like, good grief, at my bad eyesight at the age of 62, I'm not about to try to work off my cell phone. I mean, I have to, obviously, but I'm limited. So I don't do any more research work, and I certainly don't do any more writing to the book. The books I put on Amazon, I stopped doing that because I just gave up. I thought, why bother? Nobody's taking an interest in me. So then I switched to doing essays, and I posted on various places like archive.org under my username there at archive.org called Gertrude Stein, Stein, because they removed my Vinyasa account. They didn't like me, and neither did Wikipedia. I can't post there anymore. Anything I post under my name, if I log in, gets removed immediately. So I'm booted out of a lot of places. But I was on probation for a little while at Quora, but now I'm off of probation, and I can post there, so whoopee-doo. So this video is to bring you up to date about the missing pieces of information about... Now, Tesla's special generator is the format that we use for constructing this levitational engine, shall we call it, because it has all the elements. It has a huge electrostatic field produced by humongous size, what it designates as M coils, M as in Mary, 2 of them, that are wound on humongous horseshoe-shaped iron cores. And the 2 horseshoes, the feet of the 2 horseshoes face each other, okay, with a gap in between. And then there's a little rod in there whose endpoints of the rod just goes to the edge of either side of the 2 horseshoes. And it reciprocates within that gap, and it has 2 coils on each end of that rod. And in the middle of the rod is a piston, and the piston is specially designed. I did an animated video, so you have to go to vinyasi.info /circuitjs #1 /texts, and then look up Nikola Tesla, and I think it's in there. There's an animation GIF on, and I think also a movie, on the animation of my description of the airflow pattern and a redrawing of the piston that Thomas Comerford Martin, via William Line. William Line brought it to our attention in Chapter 18 of his book, Pentagon Aliens, but Thomas Comerford Martin, in his last chapters, Chapter 63 of his book on the inventions and writings of Nikola Tesla, that chapter talks about Tesla's special generator. And it had a periodicity of 80 cycles per second, and it never varied. It was very crucial, Tesla related in his demonstration of 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair in the agricultural building, 2 years before his lab fire, so obviously, and 1 year after the publication of Thomas Comerford Martin's book, so obviously somebody got wind, read the book, and decided they would steal whatever they could and destroy all the evidence of what was left remaining, and that was the end of that. And so Tesla never patented his ideal flying machine. But the Germans got it, because they're the ones who stole his stuff and arsoned his lab. Be that as it may, we kind of know this, because in 1895, a year after Thomas Comerford Martin's book, immediately after the fire, Carl Linde, Linde, of Germany, patented his liquefaction of air process. And liquefied air was stored in canisters and then decompressed to flash boil back into air to run the piston. And it only had to reciprocate a 1/16 of an inch. Now, in Thomas Comerford Martin's book, the denominator is missing. And one version, somebody wrote in the numeral 4, but it's not a 1/4 of an inch. No way. It's a 1/16 according to William Line, and so we have to go by what William Line says, because he's got all kinds of inside sources of information in the CIA and military intelligence. So we have to believe him, because we don't know who else to believe at this point. So it only had to reciprocate a 1/16 of an inch in order to vibrate the electromagnetic field of those 4 coils on the reciprocating rod, such as they are positioned amidst the stationary electrostatic field of the 2 very large horseshoe M coils. According to William Line, they were wound with like 50 miles of winding wire. Obviously, it's going to be a thin gauge because it has to be a high voltage coil of low passage of current. But the H coils, the 4 H coils, which come in 2 pairs, and I believe they're simply looped to themselves, basically, are current coils. So their resistance has to be low. They have to be a thicker, stouter gauge wire. And actually, no, they're not going to be looped to themselves, will they? Maybe not. See, I don't know all these details because they have to be powered, don't they? Probably by the reciprocating design at is.gd/Heaviside Ferranti and Heaviside Ferranti schematic, something along those lines of that nature. Let's see, what else do I have to cover? Now, there is a problem with how do we generate an electrostatic field. First of all, we know the FCC will be very unhappy with us if we do this. So we have to ionize the excess field. And apparently we have to do what Richard Hackenberger learned to do the hard way after his FCC raid came upon him at his shop while he was working on the Edwin Gray motor. He didn't have a transistor radio nearby to let him know what he was doing. And he was sending all the excess energy, COP of nearly 300 times, 30,000%. He had to send it into 2 batteries, and they were blowing up batteries. They didn't know what to do with the excess energy. And the only reason why they know they were putting out 300 COP was because the device was tested by the Bing Crosby Foundation. It had a research foundation that was set up during World War II to streamline the process of getting inventors' inventions into the marketplace so that for the war effort. So it was still in place in the 70s when it tested their device at something like 293 COP, something like that. So it was documented, energy in versus energy out. And they didn't know what to do with the excess energy. Well, lo and behold, the FCC raid taught Richard a lesson. He has to find a new way. They can't keep blowing up batteries. So what they did was they wrapped, first of all, the chassis of their device was aluminum, coated with Teflon on the inside. On the outside were 9 copper bands of sheet metal wrapped around the perimeter, the circular surface of the aluminum chassis. And the bands connected with themselves. 9 bands connected with each of themselves, but not with each other, and not to anything else. And this, of course, was to create an electromagnetic conduit with outside the motor to convert some of the electrostatic field into electromagnetic current within those sheet metal bands. But that's not the end of it. Furthermore, the braces that supported the rotor coils, I'm not sure about the stator coils, but it's in the patent. You can see it. The braces are insulated from the rest of the supporting structure of the rotor itself. The braces, or the support braces, upon which the coils are placed upon, are insulated from the rotor that they are set into. Now, I don't know about the stator coils, but I remember distinctly the rotor coils, but it may also apply to the stator coils, but be that as it may. And it may be that as it may. So what Mark McKay tells us is that what he had to do was force compressed air into the space inside the motor. Now that compressed air would ionize because you've got copper on the inside, the coils, copper on the outside, the bands, the 9 bands, and aluminum and a moving body of air and Teflon and the insulation on the windings in between. The dielectric, you have a capacitor of floating plates. And yet the dielectric, or portion of the dielectric, the moving air, becomes charged, it becomes ionized because it becomes polarized, and because it's air, it's going to ionize, and it is removed at a fast enough pace to help reduce the buildup of charge, because a buildup of charge is going to occur in arc. And that's why they had to throw the excess into batteries, because of all the arcing going on inside the motor. So to prevent the arcing and to ionize that charge, at the same time, they ionized a moving body of air in addition to all of these other components, the bands, are ionized. You have to consider that the copper is being ionized as well because of the flow of electromagnetic current, because that's what ionization represents in a liquid or fluid medium. It's the analog to the flow of current in a wire. So you had to do that in a body of air and remove the body of air so that the air could release its ionic charge to nearby objects that are attached to the ground by one means or another. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, the windows, the open windows, trees outside. Any object that by one means or another eventually reaches the earth, because the charge only has to go along the surface of those objects. It doesn't have to reach the object and go through the object. So it could be an insulator object, wood, just so long as, well, wood is not a good example. Plastic is better. Just so long as it's a dielectric material that is chargeable with static charge, such that, you rub a balloon on your chest and then it can cling to things. If it can cling to objects, then it will attract ionic charge into itself and ground it out, or spread it out, one way or the other. So this is what has to be done on the outside of the vessel, the levitation vehicle that this thing is running in. And it also has to be on the outside of the motor device, the chassis of the motor device. So it has to be placed in various places. Now, as the vehicle is moving through the airspace, it's going to have air flowing over the copper bands, whatever, that you've placed on the outside. And I suspect this is the only reason why an aerial was, a 6-foot aerial was on, or 5-foot, was on the backside of the Pierce Arrow of 1931. I'm pretty sure Tesla did the same thing in 1897 in order to discharge excess electrostatic buildup in that aerial. That was the only purpose of the aerial. It wasn't to receive energy, it was to get rid of it. Because you have to, because you're creating so much of it. Now, obviously, my simulation is idealistic, and so it designates a huge COP of gazillions. But in the real world, it's probably closer to the Edwin Gray motor, a few hundred COP. Maybe more, maybe more, maybe less, but somewhere in that ballpark. Because you have to have that much energy, so much so that you're willing to throw it away. That you have so much you got to throw it away, and then you've got yourself the basis of a UFO power supply. You've got to be able to throw it away. It's got to be that much excessive power. And the only moving part is not moved by electromagnetic movement, it's moved by compressed air, namely the piston on the shaft supporting the electromagnetic coils. That's the only part that has to move, and they're lightweight. And you're only moving it 1/16 of an inch. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, Tesla is a master of efficiency. He really did it. He really did it. But obviously, the size of that special generator in Thomas Comerford Martin's book, Xeroxed and copied in William Lyon's Chapter 18 of his Pentagon Aliens book, and also probably in his ether physics book as well, since that got into more of his speculation of how Tesla's levitating device worked. But we know now that it didn't exactly work that way. But some elements are valid, and that special generator is definitely valid. But it probably has to be scaled down, because the size of that special generator was probably engineered to accommodate the needs of a very large battleship or submarine, you know? I mean, something very large, like a major transport vehicle. You know, not a one-person potbelly stove that Nikola Tesla had built in the 1894 was flying around the skyline, the night line skyline of New York City out of his lab window at night, making little sorties of trips to test out his newfound invention. It's amazing, you know, no parachute, nothing, you know. Daring. Well, you know, if you read his biography, his autobiography, the guy was a very daring man. He took a lot of risks even as a child. Leaping off the rooftop of his parents' home, holding nothing but an umbrella, convinced he could fly. He got a severe reckoning when he hit the earth, but it taught him to discipline his mind because his fantasies were so vivid he thought they were real. He could reach out and touch his fantasies. And that's why he had a simulator for a brain, because he actually believed his fantasies, he could touch them. He could touch them, let alone see them. But he disciplined himself, and he came up with a perfect simulator for a brain. Once he got taught all the theories of electrodynamics, he could simulate anything in his brain. He didn't have to engineer anything. He didn't have to use any math. So he wasn't an engineer in today's world terms. He was a simulator, a human simulator, with a photographic memory to boot. Beautiful gifts he was given at birth. So anyway, that covers just about everything, I think. I wanted to cover this. I mean, I didn't want to keep it to myself forever. I tried. About 24 hours, 48 hours. But it did come to me that there was missing pieces of information, and I thought it necessary to share it with you. So, the few of you who will see this video, you will now know how to build Nikola Tesla's ideal flying machine. But you have to do your research. You have to read William Lyne's book, Pentagon Aliens, and his other book, Ether Physics, and Thomas Comerford Martin's 63rd chapter of his book, published in 1894, if you can find a copy. It's on my website, vinyasi.info, under that Nikola Tesla folder directory. So you don't have to depend on archive.org if there's no copy there. Let's see, what else? And basically, you know, you've got to get used to this kind of knowledge. It's really a skill you have to develop of comprehension. It's but you know, depending on how much information I've shared with you and how good you're at it, at the technical side, as a technician's point of view of building things, you know, that'll kind of be the limiting factor or the determining factor as to whether or not you're able to build this thing without any further to do. I don't know. I couldn't tell you really, because I only went so far with my research. So, and I've never built anything, and I probably, well, I don't know about probably. I don't want to say. Not at the moment. I will not be building anything. I can assure you that much, because there are too many people on this planet, and I am in no condition to compete with any of them. So I'll just talk. I talk, I draw, I write, and I leave it at that, to stimulate your mind and open up our vistas of understanding. But no way am I going to want to compete with anyone. Not that I wouldn't want to fix my car by turning it into a, what did they call it back in the 60s? Not the Love Bug. There was a movie, Walt Disney did a movie about this Volkswagen Beetle. Uncannily enough, a Volkswagen Beetle, because that was the shell of the Foo Fighter crafts of World War II that the Germans were sending in a barrel roll around the B-52s and whatnot, because the gunnery guy couldn't follow the tight circle, the spiral that the Foo Fighter was doing to distract him. A tight barrel roll around the craft, right around it, within, you know, like a fraction of an inch. He's so fast that he couldn't get a shot at it. And meanwhile, the Luftwaffe are coming in, you know, with, distraction. What about this guy? I should fire at him. No, you can't, can you? You better deal with the other one. Probably blocked the gunnery so he couldn't get a shot out anyway, even if he wanted to. But they couldn't have ammo on board because it would self-detonate. And later on, they had to come up with the Star Wars, ray gun. And by that time, they lost the war, and they were overrun by the invasion at Normandy. So they never got a chance to get their technology out on the battlefield. But it was on the assembly line. Patton was going to disclose that, and that's why he didn't last too long in his body. But he made a quote. He said, if the war had gone on only 3 weeks longer, if they had postponed the invasion of Normandy by 3 weeks, they wouldn't have stood a chance of invading or winning when they did. He said it would have dragged on much longer because the Nazis had so much advanced technology that they finally had finalized and were busy assembling and hadn't finished assembling it yet. Levitational craft with various ray guns on board, all transport vehicles, transport vehicles, the various Zeppelin line that had been transformed from transport via, hydrogen or helium, instead were levitational. So, and they could transport huge tanks and whole armies, divisions of armies, because it neutralized inertia, so they could make it any size they wanted to. So it would have been formidable to try to win the war had it not ended when it did. But we didn't win. As according to William Lyon, it was a truce, an armistice, and the Nazis merely lost their country, but they still did not win the war. I mean, not lose the war. And they're the ones responsible for 9/11. Anyway, so when we vibrate an electromagnetic field that is rotating in a stationary electrostatic field, doesn't that sound like the Hutchison effect? Especially if you have multiple electromagnetic coils. And doesn't that sound like what Judy Woods said happened to the Twin Towers in 9/11? So it's the same technology as levitating a craft. They just scaled it up to the to destroy a whole building during 9/11. But it's the same technology. You just deal with it differently. And I think I posted this in that video. My other video on UFO technology is that part 1. I guess this will be part 3. So it'll have the same title, but it'll be part 3. It'll have the number 3 after it because the whole title, if I want to duplicate it, is 99 characters long. So I only have room for 1 digit. But I think I said in that video that the difference is that it was not an organized electromagnetic field such as it is in Tesla's special generator. The electromagnetic field is the vibration is not along a single longitudinal line. It's going every which way, and so you get the destruction of the object, in this case 9/11 towers, and they turn to dust and blow away with the wind. They're gone with the wind. But if you vibrated everything along a single axis and reciprocate that vibration along a single linear axis, then you have the beginnings of levitation. So it's really a question of how you vibrate the electromagnetic field. And that means they vibrated it. Probably they set up a major vibration up and down across the building, since they had the aerial at the top, the microwave aerial, and then the ground plane underneath the building. But then they must have done some other vibrations using the steel girders inside the building to pass the current sideways, I guess. Maybe expansive, contractive, maybe moving it from interior girders to exterior girders and then back into interior girders, doing it that way, even though it was set up originally in a vertical shaft, the orientation of the axis of the electromagnetic field, but it was pulsed at a certain rate, moving inward and outward, creating another motion that would have broken apart the building. So there were probably multiple motions, not random geometric mechanical motions or random mechanical motions, but specifically designed to break apart the building. And I think that's, if I was going to do it, that's what I would try to do, probably. Anywho, enough said. But you have to study one in order to study the other. You know, you have to study 9/11 in order to understand Tesla's ideal flying machine, you know, the principle of levitation, because, you know, the machination of levitation, not the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra of levitation. That's it. Although they're probably related, but you know, when it comes to machining it, you know, the technology of creating a machine to do it, I could be a little different. I don't know. Whatever. At least in how you go about it. You know, maybe the end result is the same. You know. Anyway, you have to look it up. I think it's Sutra number 39, possibly. Pada 4. Is it 3 or 4? I forget. It might be 3. Pada being chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Anyway, it's basically the relationship of the body to space. Lightness of cotton down results in movement through space. Something along those lines. So what that has to do with the design of this craft, I'm not so sure. But it produces similar results. So, you know, you have to wonder if there is any similarity. And maybe there is, if a person thought it through. I can't think at the moment. I'm just making this video. So I'm a dummy at the moment. I'm just talking. A talking dummy. Acting like I'm smart when all I'm doing is reiterating what came to me while I was in the bathtub. I should do this video, you know. It's about time I talk about it. Because a few other things came to me, and so I thought, okay, now it's time to do this video. Okay, enough said. That's why you see, okay, I'm bare shoulders, you know, I'm a little naked at the moment, so didn't comb my hair, and did dry it, though. So, that's my video. I got all this hot air because I took a hot bath, so now I can shut up.